what a day! What a lovely day!
Mad Max. There are only a few titles that instantly conjure up visions of edge-of-your-seat, rip-roaring car chases, high-octane thrills, and pedal-to-the-metal action like Mad fucking Max. The series helped usher in both the carsploitation and ozploitation genres of the 1970s, put Mel Gibson on the map, and has inspired countless directors. It's the epitome of awesome. And it all started in the mind of one man, George Miller. George Miller studied medicine at the University of New South Wales. While there, he and his younger brother Chris entered a student film competition and won first prize with their 1-minute short film, St. Vincent's Review Film. While attending a film workshop at Melbourne University, he met Byron Kennedy, someone he would form a lasting friendship and a production partnership with. They eventually produced a short film titled Violence in Cinema Part 1, which screened at numerous film festivals and won several awards. After completing his residency, Miller spent his time off working as part of the crew on short experimental films. Later that year, he and Kennedy founded Kennedy Miller Productions. 8 years after that, they produced their first film, Mad Max. While working as an ER doctor in Sydney, Miller was exposed to numerous injuries and deaths brought on by motorcycle and car accidents. These would eventually influence a lot of the stunts and injuries depicted in the first Mad Max film.
He leaves the seat, goes through the windscreen, head first straight into the tree, right? And then bounces back through the windscreen. By the time we got to him, he was just sitting there trying to scream with his face ripped off.
Inspired by movies like A Boy and His Dog, High Noon, and Stone,
When you're on a bike, I mean a big bike, you've got all power, man.
Miller was interested in making a silent movie with sound, meaning he wanted to keep the narrative of the film simple, but use vigorously energetic imagery reminiscent of Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd. He aimed to make a western in new clothes, combining the genres of car action and horror. Since the budget was so low for the movie and not being able to afford to pay extras or have properly maintained sets, Miller set the story in a grim dystopian future, believing audiences would accept the violence of the film easier that way. After reading Pauline Kael's essay Raising Cain, Miller concluded that most major American scriptwriters were former journalists like Herman Mankiewicz, who of course wrote Citizen Kane, and Ben Hecht, who wrote more classic Hollywood movies than we have time to mention. Miller hired fellow film buff James McCausland, editor of The Australian, to write the script, working off a one-page outline provided by Miller. McCausland had no formal training in writing other than watching movies with Miller and discussing the dramatic structures of westerns, road movies, and action films. McCausland took on the dialogue of the film while Miller handled the narrative beats. McCausland said he based the often baroque and hyper-speech of the film's villains on his observations of the effects the 1973 oil crisis had on Australian motorists, basing the film's thesis on that people would do almost anything to keep vehicles moving and the assumption that nations would not consider the huge costs of providing infrastructure for alternative energy until it was too late. Miller and McCausland put together a 40-page presentation, distributed it everywhere they could think of, and eventually raised the funds, also contributing money themselves by working 3 months' worth of emergency medical calls, with Kennedy driving and Miller doctoring. Raising over $350,000, they had enough money to make their movie. Originally, Miller wanted to cast an American actor to have the film be seen as widely as possible, even traveling to LA to look for actors, but instead eventually went the opposite route, casting unknown actors who didn't carry any past associations with them and to save the budget from being taken up by an American name. Miller's first choice for the titular character Max was James Healy, an Australian television actor who was looking for new acting gigs, but upon reading the script, Healy found the dialogue meager and unappealing.
People don't believe in heroes anymore. Well, damn them!
Producers held an audition for Mad Max with graduates from the National Institute of Dramatic Art, specifically looking for spunky young guys. One young actor's audition impressed Miller and it won him the role of Max. This actor was, of course, Mel Gibson. Miller's original wish to cast an American actor for Max came true in the casting of Gibson, as he had been living in Australia for over a decade but was originally born in New York. There's an unsubstantiated story that Gibson showed up to his audition with a black eye from a bar fight the night before, but this has since been denied by Miller. Steve Bisley, Gibson's roommate and fellow classmate, was actually the one who encouraged Gibson to audition. Bisley also attended the audition and won the role of Max's partner, Jim Goose. Bisley has since stated that he doubts he got the role because of his acting prowess, but rather because he could ride a motorcycle. For the main villains, we've got Hugh Keays-Byrne and Tim Burns as Toe Cutter and Johnny the Boy, both classically trained Shakespearean actors. Hugh actually based his portrayal of Toe Cutter on Genghis Khan.
Anything I say. What a wonderful philosophy you have.
For the role of the biker gang extras, actual members of Australian outlaw motorcycle clubs were utilized. Because of the low budget, the biker gang often had to ride to set in costume with their prop weapons on full display. Assuming they'd be pulled over by local police, production wrote them a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card. This being a letter clarifying the film's requirements and asking for the police department's understanding and cooperation.
They get out of jail free card.
Mad Max tells the story of Max Rockatansky, a maverick cop working for the Maine Force Patrol in a decaying world that exists only a few years from now. A world where renegade nomad bikers and the police compete for control of the highways, and tow trucks race cops to inevitable accidents. Compared to later Mad Max sequels, though, the world hasn't moved on much in this one. When Max takes down a certain lunatic nomad biker, the Knight Rider, his fellow bikers decide to get back at him.
I'll add it to my threat collection.
Shooting began on October 24th, 1977 and lasted over a period of 12 weeks until December 1977 in and around Melbourne. Miller describes the shoot as guerrilla filmmaking, with the crew closing down some roads without permission or the use of film permits. They couldn't use walkie-talkies for fear that their frequency would correspond with police radios. As filming continued though, the Victoria Police caught wind of the production and eventually helped the crew by closing down roads and escorting vehicles. The production was plagued by accidents. Miller even quit the production at one point, and Byron Kennedy had to call up Brian Trenchard Smith, a fellow Australian filmmaker known at the time for The Man from Hong Kong, to see if he would fill in for Miller. Trenchard Smith advised to hire an assistant director to aid Miller in the production. Ian Goddard, a motorcycle racer who had stunt experience, joined the production. Miller rallied and completed the film, though it's been reported that the crew had little respect for him during the shoot. In order to achieve more adrenaline-pumping shots and put the audience in the heart of the action, Miller mounted cameras right onto the cars, often having cinematographer David Egby on the back of a speeding motorcycle. For one particular shot, Egby held the camera riding as a passenger on a motorcycle going 110 miles per hour. Egby said, "I knew we were risking our lives out there." Much of Mad Max's visual slickness comes down to being shot in an anamorphic format, one of the first Australian films to do so, and was only made possible by salvaging a damaged 35mm lens left behind from the shoot of Sam Peckinpah's The Getaway. The film's post-production was done at Byron Kennedy's house, with Miller and Kennedy editing the film in Kennedy's lounge room on a home-built editing machine that Kennedy's father, who was an engineer, had designed for them. Kennedy would cut the sound in the lounge room and Miller would cut the picture in the kitchen. For the soundtrack, Miller wanted a gothic sound like the kind Bernard Herrmann had used in Hitchcock films, and hired composer Brian May after hearing some of his work. No, not Brian May from Queen. Though that probably would have been cool. Since Mel Gibson was relatively unknown in the US, the original trailers for the film concentrated on car crashes and action scenes. In fact, Mel Gibson is not even featured on the original poster. If you look closely at this character's costume, you'll realize that this is actually a depiction of Max's partner, Jim Goose.
Jimmy the Goose. Far to the right and twice as ugly.
I have very fond memories of renting this movie and the whole trilogy on VHS as a kid. Fuck the Fast and the Furious franchise, this is a real car movie. The movie starts off with a bang. The title comes roaring at you with the sound of engines accompanied by Brian May's soundtrack. They definitely nailed that gothic sound, and the blaring trumpets add a real seriousness to the film. The movie starts out with a great character intro for Max. The Maine Force Patrol is chasing a berserk motorcycle gang member named the Knight Rider, who has just killed a cop and stolen his vehicle. After more than a few close calls, it looks like the AC/DC quoting Knight Rider is going to get away, until Max steps in. And he barely has to do anything. Max breaks his concentration with a near miss, and the Knight Rider becomes so intimidated that it looks like he's about to give up. Right before he crashes his car, killing himself and his girlfriend. This is what I meant by great character intro. This scene requires no explanation as to what's going on. You understand what's going on between Max and the Knight Rider just by the acting. It's driven by pure emotion. One of this movie's many subtleties. In a movie about daredevil car chases that has its fair share of raw brutality, a lot of what makes this movie work is actually its subtleties. We're here to watch the car chases and stunts, of course, but it's all held up by a very simple story that the audience can easily understand. At its core, it's a revenge story, but it's filled with characters we like because they're essentially normal people thrown into daring situations. There's some good foreshadowing when Max is talking to his chief, trying to quit his job as a police officer when he says,
"Look, any longer out on that road and I'm one of them, you know? A terminal crazy. Only I got a bronze badge to say I'm one of the good guys."
This sums up Max as a character, but also foreshadows what will happen to him in the end, when he's taken his revenge and keeps on driving.
Perhaps it's a result of an anxiety.
I can't make a Mad Max video without talking about the car. Max has one of the coolest, if not the coolest cars in the movies. The V8 Interceptor.
The last of the V8 Interceptors.
This car is the beating heart of the series. It's made it into every sequel except Beyond Thunderdome and has become a staple of the series as well. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a car guy, so I can't really talk about the car that much, but I can show you. On a budget of just over $350,000, the film grossed over $5 million in Australia and over $10 million worldwide. At the time, it was the most profitable movie ever made and held the Guinness World Record for highest box office to budget ratio of any movie until the release of The Blair Witch Project in 1999. Critics found the movie polarizing when it came out, complaining about the violence of the film, saying that it had all the emotional uplift of Mein Kampf, and saying it would only find an audience with rapists, sadists, and murderers. While critics complained about the violence portrayed in the film, if you pay close attention, most of the violence happens off-screen, and the movie only really shows the aftermath of what happened. Our minds fill in the rest, and our imagination is what sets the tone and level of violence. The film triumphed over the critics in the end, and was nominated for 7 Australian Film Institute awards, winning 3 for Best Editing, Original Music Score, and Sound, and was given a special award for stunt work. The film has had a lasting influence on apocalyptic fiction ever since. It's inspired countless artists, including Bronson's anime series The Fist of the North Star. James Cameron has stated that this movie, along with Star Wars, had a major influence on some of the camera work in The Terminator.
What's the dog's name?
Max.
And James Wan and Lee Wannell gave credit to the final scene in the movie where Max handcuffs Johnny's ankle to the car and offers up a hacksaw to either cut off his foot or try to cut through the handcuffs to escape the car exploding as an inspiration for their movie Saw, which we know went on to make a ton of sequels. The movie and its sequels have also been referenced in countless other properties.
Who's Mad Max?
And it's often credited as the movie that opened up a global market for Australian film, eventually racking up a gross of $100 million worldwide. And we all know what happens with successful movies by now, right? That's right, they get sequels.
Like and subscribe.
After the success of Mad Max, George Miller was offered all kinds of opportunities to direct in Hollywood, including an offer to direct First Blood. I love First Blood, but damn, I gotta wonder what that'd have been like. Miller had his sights set on something else, though. He wanted to develop a rock and roll movie tentatively titled Roxanne. He teamed up with Terry Hayes, who he had met after working together on the novelization of Mad Max. Unfortunately for Miller, his dream of a rock and roll movie never panned out and was ultimately shelved. Fortunately for us, this got Miller thinking about returning to the post-apocalyptic world of Mad Max. There was a strong pressure to make a sequel, and feeling he had no control over the production of the first film, he felt he could overcome some frustrations from making the original. Do a better job and be more ambitious with the second movie, using some pent-up energy for the story and filmmaking. Inspired by Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the works of Carl Jung, and Akira Kurosawa's samurai movies, Miller teamed up with Terry Hayes again to write a sequel. Filming took place over 12 weeks in the Australian outback in the winter of 1981, on a budget that was approximately 10 times larger than the first film. Miller returned as writer and director, Byron Kennedy returned as producer, Brian May came back to do the music, and of course, Mel Gibson returned as Max, who only has around 38 lines of dialogue in the movie, by the way. Bruce Spence joined the team as the gyro captain, and we've got Mick Jagger as Papagallo, the idealistic leader of the good guys. If Bruce Spence looks familiar to some of you nerds out there, he also played the Train Man in The Matrix Revolutions. And for the real nerds out there, he played Tien Madun in Revenge of the Sith. We've also got this awesome little kid, the feral child, who takes a liking to Max. And Max has a dog companion to keep him company this time. Rumor has it that this dog was actually saved from being euthanized by the crew. The day before it was supposed to be put down, the crew were visiting its shelter looking for a dog for the movie. This dog was picked out from all the other dogs due to him picking up a rock off the ground and playing with it like a toy. The crew figured this behavior fit right into the world of Mad Max and adopted him to be trained for the movie. The dog was also adopted by a crew member after filming Wrapped. Mad Max 2 is the movie that sets the stage for what the whole series will be known for. A crumbling post-apocalyptic world, unbelievable car chases, and over-the-top demented villains. The intro credits are like listening to an orchestra prepare. We get a recap of the events of the first movie, letting us know that since taking his revenge on the bike gang of the first film, Max has since begun to lose his mind out on the road.
A man haunted by the demons of his past.
But more importantly, we get exactly why the world is dying. Taking place 5 years after the events of the first film, this time around the world has moved on a bit more. A world dependent on fuel collapses when the two opposing powers take each other's fuel reserves out. Due to widespread oil shortages, civilization has since collapsed and descended into barbarism. As a result, gangs take over the highways, taking a toll on society as a whole. After the intro, we blast right into the movie. While scavenging the wastelands for fuel, subsisting on dog food, and clinging to things that still make him human, Max happens upon a group of settlers barricaded in an oil refinery protected by steel and flamethrowers, who are being attacked by rogue motorcycle gangs who want their fuel. The leader of these marauders is the Lord Humongous. A little known fact here is that Humongous was originally supposed to be revealed as Jim Goose, Max's old partner from the first film. This idea was eventually scrapped, but if you look closely you can see some hints. There's police vehicles in his gang, he uses a sidearm similar to the main Force Patrol, and there's evidence of burns behind his mask. The Humongous tells them that he'll spare their lives if they give up the fuel in an iconic speech.
Just walk away, and there will be an end to the horror.
Just walk away,
spare your lives. Just walk away.
He's pretty good.
But Max has a better deal for the settlers. He'll trade them a vehicle that can haul their fuel out in exchange for all the fuel he can carry.
2 days ago, I saw a vehicle that'd haul that tanker. You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
What follows is what makes the movie iconic, the car chases. The last of the V8 Interceptors is back, and these chases are always the stuff of insanity, and the stunts are awesome. This guy actually broke his leg in this shot. If you haven't seen this movie, do yourself a favor. There was really nothing like this at the time. There's a climactic chase that lasts almost 15 minutes long, and the tanker roll stunt at the end was deemed so dangerous that the stunt driver was not allowed to eat any food 12 hours before they shot, just in case they had to rush him to surgery. Max regains a little of his humanity helping the settlers out, and we're treated to an explosion so big at the end, it rocks the camera. Because Mad Max was still generally unknown and still gaining popularity on TV in the US, all the advertising for Mad Max 2 shied away from the character of Max and didn't reference that this was a sequel. Warner Brothers decided to retitle the movie to The Road Warrior to avoid any confusion. Most people's first time seeing any footage from Mad Max 1 was during the prologue of The Road Warrior. When the first film was released on home video, it was also marketed as the thrilling predecessor to The Road Warrior. Mad Max 2 was a commercial success, making over $10 million in Australia alone, doubling what the first film made to become the country's second highest grossing movie at the box office, second only to the Peter Weir war drama Gallipoli, which came out earlier the same year. When this movie came out in 1981, critics loved it, hailing it as everything Mad Max with a bigger budget should be, praising the film's action, special effects, costumes, stunts, pacing and editing, and ability to make a good story out of a bare-bones plot. At the 10th Saturn Awards, the film won Best International Film and was nominated for 5 more awards. Best Director, Best Actor for Gibson, Best Supporting Actor for Bruce Spence, Best Writing, and Best Costumes for Norma Moriso. The costumes in the film have also created a lasting legacy of their own, inspiring future artists to recreate the look and feel in their own work. And it's got more than a few parodies and ripoffs.
Morty, shoot the Mohawk guy! They all have Mohawks!
Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior is still considered to be one of the greatest action films of all time and on the short list of sequels that's better than its predecessor.
Oh, come on. Can't we just get Beyond Thunderdome?
Sadly, producer Byron Kennedy was killed in a helicopter crash in 1983 while scouting locations for a third Mad Max movie. Naturally, George Miller was hesitant to continue making the film, too depressed to go on without his producing partner and friend. But eventually, reluctance turned to a need to finish the film for Kennedy and to get over the shock and grief of what happened. Because he was still grieving the loss of Kennedy while shooting, Miller asked his friend and fellow filmmaker George Ogilvy to help him finish the film, receiving a co-director credit. Brian May did not return to do the soundtrack, but Tina Turner, who stars in the movie, did 2 songs for the soundtrack, one for The Living and We Don't Need Another Hero. The latter won a Grammy that year for Best Female Rock Vocal Performance, and it is pretty good. The first half of the movie is really rad. It opens with a longer-haired, more wild-eyed Max chasing someone who stole his camel train and arriving at Bartertown, where you can bring goods or services to barter for any number of things. Side note here, the thief Max is chasing is actually played by Bruce Spence, which I always thought was cool. It kinda reminds me of the Man with No Name trilogy, where Sergio Leone casts a lot of the same actors for different roles while the main character stays the same. At Bartertown, Max eventually gets noticed by Auntie Entity, who coerces Max into killing her rival Master Blaster, who she is currently in a power struggle over Bartertown with.
Who run Bartertown? Master Blaster runs Bartertown.
Max must battle Blaster in a gladiatorial, no-holds-barred, fight-to-the-death called Thunderdome, with weapons like giant sledgehammers and, of course, chainsaws. All while tethered to giant bungee cords. Thunderdome itself is awesome, and one of the best parts of the series. Its iconic rules are simple. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
After Max bests but refused to kill Blaster at the end of the fight, he is banished from Bartertown, being bound and placed on a horse to wander the wasteland. Which kinda doesn't seem so bad. Sure, the wasteland is an unsurvivable wasteland, but considering some of the other options were amputation, prison, or even death, it seems like Max got off kinda lucky. Here's where the movie gets interesting. After collapsing in the desert, Max awakens to find himself in another movie. There's a large group of Lord of the Flies, Peter Pan children who believe Max is their fabled savior destined to return and lead them to the fabled Tomorrow Land.
We gotta see Tomorrow Land.
Home! Tomorrow!
We all know that one day the provider will set us free, make everything like it was in the before time, in the long, long ago.
The real time!
If you haven't seen this movie, I guess I'll just let you experience the rest on your own. But if there comes a point in the movie where you feel like you should just turn it off because now it's a different movie, follow that instinct. It goes from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome to Mad Max Saves the Kids or something. There is a pretty cool scene at the end though, involving a high-speed, stunt-filled chase with a train, so at least we've got that. I guess. I'm not sure exactly what went wrong with this movie. There is a rumor that George Miller wanted to make a movie with a Lord of the Flies type of story about a tribe of children that is discovered by an adult, and it was suggested that he use Max as the adult who finds them. So it could have just been doomed from the beginning, starting off as an idea for a completely different movie. Or it could be that Miller was so distraught from grieving his friend's death that his detachment about directing permeated the film. Either way, the film isn't poorly made, but its story is lacking. They've switched genres, and it's more of an adventure movie this time around, suffering too much from being two different movies meshed into one. The movie loses all its subtleties and kind of seems like it might have had too high a budget. It's like they took what people liked about The Road Warrior and expanded on it too much. Overall, even though the movie is only half good, it does have a lot of iconic things the series is known for, and opens up the lore of the series quite a bit. Bartertown and Master Blaster are awesome, and of course the namesake of the movie is the best part. Thunderdome itself has even become a colloquial term.
Welcome to Thunderdome, bitch.
Even though the budget for this one was way bigger than the first two, it only made a moderate amount of money. It grossed over $4 million, less than even the first movie made, and less than half of what The Road Warrior made, though it did make a bit more in the US and Canada with $36 million. Critics were sort of split on this one, praising the first half of the movie and saving more negative criticism for the second half involving the kids. Though for some reason Roger Ebert loved it and gave it 4 out of 4 stars, putting it in his list of top 10 movies of 1985. Since then, some fans of the series have said while it successfully deepens the lore of the series, they've also criticized the film for being Hollywoodized, and having a lighter tone than its predecessors. A strange note to end on, but as time went on, I remembered these movies for years. No matter how much time passed, Mad Max always existed on my movie radar as something very cool and very unique. A wild little Australian cult classic car movie where Mel Gibson came from that was one of the greatest action movies ever. I cherished it for life. All was quiet on the Mad Max front for a long time. Rumblings of a Mad Max sequel popped up every now and then online in the early thousands here and there, sometimes talking about something called Fury Road or even something called The Wasteland, but not much else was available back then. That was until I saw a little movie called The Hobbit, The Battle of Five Armies. While I had pretty much completely given up on that trilogy being any good, and was just determined to have a good time at the movies, little did I know I'd get a peek at something even better in the form of a teaser trailer. This movie looked incredible. It instantly brought me back to my childhood of watching Mad Max racing on desert highways and bizarre freaks in S&M gear, all set to the soundtrack of Battle Royale, another personal favorite of mine. This song also shows up in the actual movie to great effect. Seeing names like Rictus Erectus, the People Eater, and the Organic Mechanic in the cast list got me absolutely hyped. Mad Max was back, and it would be great to see what Max has been up to all these years. Who knew we were all in for one of the greatest movies ever made? Mad Max 4 had a very long production time. After Beyond Thunderdome, George Miller had thoughts about making a Mad Max movie that was one long, almost continuous chase scene. Eventually, he came up with an idea about violent marauders not fighting for oil or material goods anymore, but for human beings. Before writing the screenplay, Miller worked with 5 storyboard artists to design the film in storyboard form, producing about 3,500 panels as he wanted the film to be visually driven, with relatively little dialogue. With the look of the movie down, he then wrote the screenplay with Nico Lathoras and Brendan McCarthy. Production was postponed due to a number of reasons. The September 11th attacks caused the American dollar to collapse under the Australian dollar, making the production budget swell. Security concerns tightened travel, and the Iraq War shipping restrictions caused issues with a proposed shoot in Namibia. Miller also had commitments to his other film, Happy Feet. Yeah, that's right, the guy behind all the madness that is Mad Max is also the guy who gave us the animated movie Happy Feet. Oh, and also the Babe movies. The guy's a maniac. Mel Gibson was originally set to return as Max, but after all the production delays caused the project to sit in production hell for years, by the time Miller was ready to start on Mad Max again, both he and Gibson agreed the story wasn't about an old road warrior and moved on. Among other reasons. After briefly considering taking the story of the 4th Mad Max and doing it as either an animated film inspired by Japanese anime or as a video game, Miller decided to do a live-action movie after all. It was announced that production would start at Broken Hill, New South Wales in August 2010. Soon after, Tom Hardy was cast as the new Mad Max, beating out other contenders like Armie Hammer, Jeremy Renner, Michael Fassbender, and Eric Bana. Production had been stalled for so long that even Heath Ledger had been considered for the role. It was also announced that Charlize Theron would play a major role. Due to unexpected heavy rains causing wildflowers to grow in the desert around Broken Hill, a location the production picked for being notoriously barren and unrainy, filming was moved back to Namibia in November 2011. Principal photography began in July 2012 with most of the shooting based in the Dadaab National Park, and some scenes shot at the Cape Town Film Studios in Cape Town, South Africa. Filming wrapped in December 2012, with some reshoots for the opening and closing scenes at the Citadel shot in December 2013. Cinematographer John Seal came out of retirement to shoot the film. Due to the film's fast-paced editing, Miller told him to always keep the main actor centered in the shot so the audience didn't have to search for the main focal point. According to Miller, 90% of the effects in the film are practical. Both the Comadoof warrior's wagon and his flame-spitting guitar are fully functional, not requiring any CGI. Miller even brought in performers from Cirque du Soleil for some of the film's stunts, of which there are many. Miller recruited his wife, Margaret Sixel, to edit the film, as he felt she could make it stand out from other action films, stating, "If a guy did it, it would look like every other action movie." Sixel had 480 hours of raw footage to edit, which took 3 months to watch. The score for Fury Road was written by Dutch composer Tom Holkenborg, aka Junkie XL. And I gotta say, even though the final result of the film is incredible, it would probably be only half as good without the score. This one starts with another opening narration to set the scene. We get an update on how the world fell, and Max gives us his background. Hearing him call himself a road warrior still gives me chills.
Once, I was a cop, a road warrior searching for a righteous cause.
While Beyond Thunderdome still has some semblance of societal structure, the world of Fury Road is completely savage. We open with a completely feral Max. I really like that Max really is mad this time around. He's gone completely insane, living on eating lizards and running from the ghosts of his past.
I am the one who runs from both the living and the dead.
He has severe PTSD, frequent audio and visual hallucinations, and acts more like a caged animal than a person.
It's got a muzzle on it! It's a raging feral!
Who are these ghosts chasing him, you might ask? A lot of people have assumed it's his family from the first film or other characters from the sequels, but these characters are all actually given explanation in the Mad Max comic book by Vertigo. The comic explains a lot about the characters and events leading up to Fury Road, including Furiosa, Immortan Joe, and Nux. The little girl in Max's visions is named Glory, and is a character in Max's part of the story, where it also explains how he got his legendary V8 back. He won the parts in a Thunderdome. How cool is that? If you haven't read this comic, it's definitely worth reading.
You promised to help us!
You die!
Let us die!
The movie's opening is incredible. Max is captured by raiders and taken to the Citadel, where he is tattooed and used as a blood bag for Half-Life Warboys. Then we meet Furiosa and Immortan Joe, who is actually played by Keays-Byrne, the guy who played Toe Cutter, another one of my favorite parts of this movie. By now, the world has fallen to absolute insanity. Immortan Joe controls the water of the wasteland, keeping all of its denizens in line through tyranny and fear.
Do not, my friends, become addicted to water. It will take hold of you, and you will resent its absence.
And the world's dependency and influence of oil and cars has become a religion.
By my deeds I honor him. V8.
Furiosa, an imperator in Immortan Joe's army, has decided to leave this oppressive life, taking Joe's most valued possessions, his breeding wives, with her.
Where is she taking them?
She didn't take them, they begged her to go!
Then the movie is off to the races, and it doesn't stop. Watching this movie is like watching an opera. You barely need any dialogue and the movie knows it, relying on sound and the incredible score to sell the action. I feel like this is the Mad Max movie George Miller always imagined making.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
It works perfectly as both a reboot and a sequel to the original trilogy. Tom Hardy was the perfect guy to cast as the new Mad Max, continuing his tradition of covering his face for at least half the movie. And Charlize Theron kills it as Furiosa. This movie is just so cool. The chases are cool, the Comadoof warrior is cool, the music is cool, the costumes are cool, just everything about it is cool.
We get it, man!
There is some proof that it's both a sequel and a reboot at the same time, mostly through Max's costume and retaining wounds like getting shot in the knee in the first movie.
That's my jacket!
There's also some cool references to the Road Warrior to look out for, like the shotgun shells misfiring, fitting bodies to the front of cars, using binoculars and telescopes together, children collecting Max's hair, and the music box Max gave to the feral child making an appearance. There's also some visual cues. When Nux head's butt slit, there's a flash of white, echoing a similar effect in the Road Warrior, and these bulging eyes popping up in Max's memories. They were originally used in Mad Max 1. While Miller names the key themes of the movie as survival and humanity, primary themes that have endured throughout the entire series, it seems to me that feminism is the theme that has garnered the most scholastic attention. This seemed to upset a lot of people.
The feminists are taking over!
But Furiosa adds a lot of depth to the film, sitting right alongside Max as the narrative focal point and hero of the movie, contrasting the male-centered world and stories of the previous movies. Miller also invited Eve Ensler, an American author and feminist activist, to act as an on-set advisor, to spend a week in Namibia where she spoke to the cast about issues of violence against women.
Out here, everything hurts.
Sequels to older franchises are pretty commonplace these days, and while the majority of them aren't that great, some of them scrape by and end up being pretty cool. But Fury Road is the only sequel that I can think of that's ever lived up beyond the hype. Much like The Road Warrior, underneath it all, it's a very human story. A story of redemption and survival, and each episode Max regains a little more of his humanity before moving on back to the wasteland. Mad Max Fury Road had its world premiere on May 7th, 2015 at the TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, and was released theatrically the next day in the US. It grossed $154 million in the United States and Canada, and had a worldwide total of $415 million, against a production budget of between $154 million and $185 million. Once again, immediately upon its release, critics called Mad Max Fury Road one of the greatest action movies ever made, with the film scoring high reviews across the board. It was praised for pretty much everything, with Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron being especially praised for their performances, and the movie itself being recognized for pushing the boundaries on what an action movie can be capable of. Fury Road was nominated for several Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, and Best Visual Effects. It won Best Film Editing, Best Production Design, Best Costume Design, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Sound Editing. Its 6 awards were more than any other film at the ceremony and set a new record for most wins by an Australian film. There are some movies I wish I could see for the first time again, and this is one of them. Luckily, I got my wish with Mad Max Fury Road Black and Chrome Edition. Sometime after the release of Fury Road, George Miller painstakingly converted the film into black and white. And this isn't just some lazy black and white conversion. Miller pares the movie down to its most basic visual elements. While the original version is breathtaking with its color contrast, the black and white highlights the stark world of survival. That the movie still retains its impact and beauty in black and white speaks to its incredible stylistic elements. And that's the legacy of Mad Max. And it ain't over yet. Tom Hardy has reportedly been signed on for more sequels, including a working title Mad Max The Wasteland, and a prequel to Fury Road has been announced about a young Furiosa starring Anya Taylor-Joy in the titular role. I don't know how I feel about a Mad Max movie that's not about Max, but I have immense faith in George Miller to deliver something great. I'm sure it'll have more of what we love. Stark stories with awesome visuals, and of course, badass car chases. I guess we'll have to wait and see.